The table was set, the candles were lit. The people Hailey loved most were in the room. Justin was not. He had been there earlier in the day. He had kissed her in the morning, the specific kind of birthday morning kiss that says, "I know what day it is, and I am glad you were born." He had been present through most of the day in the ordinary birthday texture of a person whose husband knows the date and acts accordingly. Cards, small gestures, the warm attentiveness of someone who has been paying attention. He had been there. And then, in the early evening, somewhere between the afternoon and the dinner, he had said he needed to step out for a bit. He would be back. He had said it casually, the specific casualness of someone who does not want to explain something yet and is hoping the request for space will be taken at face value. He had kissed her again. He had left. He did not come back for dinner. He did not come back for the cake that had been made or the toasts that were said or the specific warmth of an evening where the people you love have gathered specifically because of you. He was not there for any of it. The chair across from Hailey was empty for the entire evening. Hailey sat at the table with the people she loved. She smiled. She was present. She laughed at the right moments and was warm in all the ways a person is warm when they are hosting their own birthday dinner without the person who should be there. She did not call him. She did not text. She sat with the empty chair and she made the evening what it needed to be without him in it. And she waited. Justin came home at 11. Hailey was still awake. She was in the living room. The birthday evening wound down. The guests long gone. The candles out. The house quiet in the specific way that houses are quiet after something has been celebrated and then ended. She had cleaned up without being asked. She had moved through the ordinary aftermath of a birthday dinner that had happened without its most important person and had made it look like something whole. She looked at him when he came in. He looked different. Not drunk. Justin does not drink. Not guilty or defensive or carrying the specific energy of someone who has done something wrong and is bracing for the response. He looked like someone who had been somewhere significant, like someone who had been carrying something for a long time and had finally found a place to set it down. Not completely, but enough. The specific quality of a person who is lighter, not because the weight has disappeared, but because it has finally been acknowledged by someone else. He sat down across from her. He said, "I'm sorry I missed dinner." She said, "Where were you?" He said, "I went to see my dad." Hailey looked at him. She said, "Tonight." He said, "Yes." She said, "On my birthday." He said, "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Not with anger, with the specific quality of someone who is deciding what the right question is before asking it. She said, "Why tonight?" Like this right now if you already feel the weight of that question. Because what Justin said next is the part that changes the entire shape of this story. Justin sat with the question for a moment. He was not evasive. He was finding the honest version, the one that did not make the choice seem more dramatic than it was or less significant than it was. He said, "Because I've been thinking about fathers, what it means to be one, what it means to have had one. Jack is almost 2, and I've been watching myself be a father, and I keep seeing my dad underneath it. The version of him that was present and the version that wasn't. The parts I inherited without choosing them and the parts I'm trying to do differently. The specific way I hold Jack in the morning and wonder whether my father ever held me that way. Whether he wanted to and didn't know how, or whether he simply wasn't there." He looked at his hands. He said, "I needed to have a conversation with him that I've been putting off for a long time. A specific one. Not the conversation we've had before. The surface version, the one where we talk around the thing without saying the thing. The actual one." He looked at Hailey. He said, "Tonight felt like the right night because your birthday, the day you came into the world, the day that gave me the 22 that I carry, felt like the right container for a conversation about what fathers owe their children. You and Jack are the reason I finally understood what I needed to say to him, so I said it on your birthday." Hailey looked at him. She said, "You went to your father on my birthday because of me," he said, "because of what having you has made me understand about what I needed to do." Yes. The relationship between Justin Bieber and his father, Jeremy, has been one of the most documented and least understood parts of Justin's public life. Jeremy was young when Justin was born, very young, the kind of young that means you are still becoming someone yourself when you are suddenly asked to be someone's father. The preparation is incomplete because there was no time for it. The presence that a child needs is the same presence you do not yet know how to give because nobody taught you how. He was not consistently present. He was in and out of Justin's childhood in ways that left marks, the kind of marks that do not disappear when the relationship later improves, or when both parties reach the age where they can have honest conversations about what happened. The marks exist regardless. They show up in the specific way Justin holds Jack, in the specific intentionality he brings to ordinary parenting moments, in the attention he brings to the routines, the mornings, the small hours of a baby's life that most people do not document because they are not dramatic. Justin had been watching himself be a father, and watching himself had meant watching what he was doing that was different, what he was doing that was the same, what he had inherited without choosing it, and what he was choosing deliberately. Every morning with Jack was, in some way, also a reckoning with Jeremy. Not with bitterness. With the clear-eyed awareness of a man who understands where he came from and is actively deciding what to do with that understanding. He had been building toward a conversation for months. On Hailey's birthday, he drove to Jeremy's house. Comment now. Do you think Justin was right to go that night, or should he have waited? He stayed for 2 hours. He sat with his father in a room and had a conversation that Justin had been circling for years. Not the conversation that appears in tabloids, not the public version of their relationship that has been written about and speculated over. The private version, the version that belongs to a son and a father in a room with no audience. He did not tell Hailey the full content of what was said. Some conversations belong only to the people in them. What happens between a man and his father in a room late at night, in the specific honesty of a conversation that has been postponed too long, is not something that gets relayed in full. It lives in the two people who were in it and goes no further. What he told her was the shape of it, the architecture of what had been said without the specific words. He said, "I told him what it feels like to be Jack's father, to hold him in the morning, to be the person he looks at when he needs to feel safe, to be the first face he recognizes as permanent. I told him that understanding what that feels like, what it means to be needed by a child that completely, made me understand what I had needed from him that I didn't get." Hailey said, "And what did he say?" Justin said, "He listened. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain the circumstances or offer the reasons I had heard versions of before. He just listened to all of it, and then he said, I know I wasn't what you needed. I'm sorry." Hailey looked at him. He said, "It wasn't everything. It wasn't a resolved relationship or a clean ending or a line between then and now, but it was honest, and honest is the direction." She recognized those words. She had said something close to them across a kitchen table once, about a different conversation. Honest is always the right direction. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "You chose my birthday." He said, "I chose the night that belongs to you and Jack and the number on my wrist. I chose it because it felt like the right container for a conversation about what fathers owe their children and what children carry from their fathers. I chose it because being with you, being Jack's father because of you, is what made the conversation finally possible." Subscribe now. Every layer of this story continues on this channel. What happened between Justin and Jeremy after that night is coming. Hailey was quiet for a long time after that. The living room was very still. The birthday candles had been blown out hours ago. The guests had gone home. The cake was in the kitchen, partially eaten, sitting in the specific state of a birthday cake after the celebration has ended. The house had the specific quality of late night, the hours when ordinary defenses come down and things can be said that would not find room in any other part of the day. She said, "Did it help?" He said, "Yes. Not completely. Some things don't resolve in one conversation. But something shifted. Something that needed to shift before Jack gets old enough to notice whether his father and grandfather are in the same room or not." She said, "Are you going to go back?" He said, "I think so. Not soon, but eventually. The conversation we had tonight opened a door that's been closed for a long time. I don't know what's on the other side yet, but the door is open," she said. "Good." She looked at him for a long moment. Something was moving across her face, not anger at having been left on her birthday, not the managed grace of someone performing forgiveness. Something more genuine than either of those things. The specific expression of someone who has just understood something about the person across from them that they had been trying to understand for a long time. She said, "I sat at that table all evening with the empty chair, And I kept thinking, wherever he is, whatever he's doing, it matters. I don't know what it is yet, but it matters. Justin said, "Did that make it easier?" She said, "Yes, because I know you, and I know you wouldn't choose to miss my birthday dinner for something that didn't matter." He said, "I should have told you where I was going." She said, "Yes, but I understand why you didn't. You needed to go without making it a conversation first. You needed it to be something you did, not something you announced." Justin looked at her. He said, "You understand that." She said, "I understand you." There is one more thing. When Justin came home that night and sat across from Hailey and told her where he had been, he said one final thing before the conversation ended. He said, "I'm going to be the father Jack needs. Not because I had a perfect example, because I know exactly what it feels like to need one and not have it fully. And knowing that, really knowing it, in the specific way that comes from being Jack's father, means I understand what I'm supposed to do." Hailey looked at him. He looked. She said, "You already are." He said, "I'm working on it." She said, "That's the same thing." The candles were out. The birthday was over. Justin had missed the dinner and come home at 11 and sat across from his wife and told her he had spent the evening becoming someone who could finally have a conversation with his own father. Hailey had waited. She had held the evening together without him. She had sat at the table and smiled and been present and not called. Because she understood, even before he explained it, that whatever had taken him away from her birthday dinner was something that had needed to happen on that specific night. She was right. There is something Hailey told someone close to the situation the following week. She said, "When he walked back in at 11, I had been sitting with the empty chair for hours, and the first thing I felt when I saw his face wasn't anger, it was recognition. I recognized the specific look of someone who has just been somewhere they needed to be, someone who went somewhere hard and did something they had been avoiding for too long." She said, "I've seen that look on him before, after the journal conversation. After that night he talked until he cried. After the conversation with his dad, it was the same look, the look of someone who is slightly lighter because they finally said the thing." The person close to the situation said, "Did you tell him that?" Hailey said, "I told him I understood. That was enough." She said, "He needed to know that I wasn't angry, that I had held the evening and it had been fine, and he needed to know that I understood why he had gone. Those two things together, that I was okay and that I understood, were what mattered. Everything else was secondary." The person close to the situation said, "Were you angry? In the moment?" Hailey thought about it. She said, "There was a moment, early in the evening, when I first realized he wasn't coming back for dinner, when something that was not quite anger moved through me. Not at him, at the situation, at the fact that something significant was happening somewhere I couldn't see." She said, "But it passed, because I know him, and I trust him, and trust doesn't mean assuming everything will always go the way you planned. It means knowing that when something goes differently, there's a reason that's worth hearing." She said, "He could only have gone because he trusted I would hold it, and he was right. I held it. The evening was fine, and when he came home I gave him the space to tell me where he had been instead of making him manage my reaction first." The person said, "That's a specific kind of trust." Hailey said, "It's the only kind that works, the kind that doesn't require the other person to check in or explain themselves in real time, the kind that says, 'Go, I'll be here. Tell me when you're back.' That is the full shape of the birthday. A table set for people who love Hailey, an empty chair, a man at his father's door for the first time in a real conversation, not the managed version, not the surface version, but the actual one that had been building for years. 2 hours in a room with his father. The specific relief of a conversation finally had. A drive home through the late evening, an 11 o'clock living room, and a wife who had held the birthday dinner together, who had smiled and been present and not called, who had sat with an empty chair and trusted that wherever he was, whatever he was doing, it was something that needed to be done. She was right. It had needed to be done for a long time, and he had chosen the night that held the most weight, the night that carries her name and Jack's name and the number on his wrist, to finally do it. Because the people who gave him the courage to have the conversation deserved to be in the room when it happened, even if only in the number, even if only in the specific gravity of a birthday that reminded him what family means. 22. November. And an empty chair that was the right choice. What do you think Jeremy said when Justin walked through his door that night? Leave your theory in the comments. I will pin the most compelling one.